Okay, I want to thank everyone for being here. It's always intriguing to me when people want to come and talk about poop and where poop goes. My career's been all about poop. I've been with the district for 27 years, over 27 years, and I've had the great pleasure, believe it or not, of working on a variety of sewer system related issues, working with our member communities, working on combined sewer overflow, working on wet weather flows at the plant. And what we want to do today is just give you a general overview of the history of sewers, how sewers locally came to be, how they've evolved over time, what happens when they get to the treatment plant, and what are the gains that we've seen over time. The district's been in business for over 40 years, and we've seen some very significant water quality gains. I'm going to show you some of those. We've got some graphs. We have significant challenges going forward, and we'll talk about that as well. Okay, I think it's important to really understand where we've been locally so that we know where we need to get to in the future. And this is a picture of the 1952 Cuyahoga River fire, and this is one of the biggest and baddest fires on that river. This river burned 13 times. So why is that? We were using the sewer, the river back then as a sewer, essentially. And this is what you saw. This is one of the famous pictures from the 60s. That's oil on that individual's hand. And if you look closely at the river, it's loaded with timber. And there's a lot of trash rolls up the river. And the combination of wood, woody materials, and oil, put a flame to it, things are going to catch on fire. And that's really what happened back in the day. This was one of the least disruptive fires, but one that garnered the most attention nationally. This was the 1969 fire on the Cuyahoga River that really sparked an environmental movement and ultimately led 3 years later to the adoption of the Clean Water Act, creation of EPA, and a lot of good things in terms of cleaning up that river. So today what we want to accomplish, what we want to cover, we'll talk a little bit about the sewer district and our responsibilities. We're going to talk about the urban water cycle, one slide, but I think it's important for people to understand that we are taking water out of Lake Erie for drinking water purposes. You are using it, and it's our job to clean it up and get it back to Lake Erie to be protective of public health and the aquatic environment. So we'll talk about the urban water cycle. Sewer System 101 will be the evolution of sewers, the first sewers in the region, how they've changed over the years, some of the problems. We've got a wet weather day. So we're going to talk all about what wet weather means to sewer systems. Once we collect wastewater from your homes and industry, we've got to treat it at our plants. Some of you will take a tour today. We'll talk in general terms about the treatment process, how we clean up the waste. And at the end, we'll show some graphs about some of the gains we've made in water quality, but some of the issues and challenges we face going forward. First, on the responsibilities. The district was created in 1972 by court order, and the reason was there was a lot of squabbles, lawsuits over service-related issues, water quality issues, basement flooding issues, a whole host of issues between all of the communities in our service area. So a court determined that a regional entity known as the Cleveland Regional Sewer District, now the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District, would be tasked with taking on the big challenges, the inter-community challenges that the region faced. We serve all or parts of 62 communities. So about 1 million people flush their toilet to our treatment plants. And each year we treat around 90 billion gallons of wastewater in our 3 treatment plants. These are the key responsibilities of the district. 4 key ones. We assumed operation and capital improvements for the Easterly, Westerly, and Southerly treatment plants, and I've got a little slide to show you where those are. We are the ones that own the sewer highways, the interceptor sewers, both combined and separate. All the local sewers, the smaller sewers along your streets, feed those interceptors. Local communities own, operate, maintain those systems. We have the responsibility for what's called combined sewer overflow, and we're going to spend a good deal of time talking about what overflows are and what we're doing about them. And lastly, we're going to touch on regional stormwater management. I want to make sure people understand all the stressors that are on our streams in Lake Erie in terms of water quality impairment, and some of the programs that we've got underway to deal with those. These are the 3 treatment plants. To the left, I guess that's west. To the left is the Westerly wastewater treatment plant. And that plant sits adjacent to Edgewater State Park. Smallest plant, serves the west side of Cleveland. In the middle is the Southerly treatment plant, and I believe you're taking a tour there today. That's our largest plant, one of the largest, if not the largest, in the state. About 500,000 or more people discharge flow to that treatment plant. To the right is our Easterly treatment plant, and that's at East 140th and Lakeshore Boulevard. This is our service area, color-coded with, in the middle, the yellowish tint are the areas that are served by combined sewer systems. And combined sewer means one pipe. And we combine wastewater from homes and industry with stormwater runoff from rooftops and streets in one pipe. So those are the oldest systems in the area. That's where the area began in terms of population growth. The tan brownish colors are served by what's called separate sewer systems. And a separate sewer system means there's 2 sewers. One is a sanitary sewer to collect waste from your homes. The second is a storm sewer to take that street runoff to the nearest stream. You can see all of the communities. We touched Columbia Township, Lorain County. There are some Summit County communities, northern Summit County, a little bit in Willoughby Hills, not all of Cuyahoga County. Lakewood, Bedford, Strongsville, portions of Strongsville have their own treatment plants, and Euclid. Since the district was created in '72, there's been over 40 years of environmental investments. $4 billion plus and growing fairly rapidly. And these investments were made on wastewater treatment plants. Back in '72, the treatment plants were essentially in disrepair. And there was a new EPA that was formed, and new limits were put on how much pollutant discharge you can send to the waterways. So there were significant investments early on in wastewater treatment plants and getting them up to meeting permit limitations. We followed in the 80s and 90s with a program of interceptor and relief sewer construction. A lot of sewer flooding, both in the combined and the separate areas. And we built these interceptors and relief sewers to provide more capacity to convey flow, to keep it out of basements. And that was a significant ticket, over thinking about $1 billion of investment there. We have been working on combined sewer overflow control since '72, but we're really working on it in earnest. We have a $3 billion project Clean Lake program. We'll talk about that a little bit. That's a long-term construction program. I think we've got 15 to 20 years remaining on that program. And a whole host of other facility upgrades have been made. So I'm going to now switch to the urban water cycle. So it's one of our hardest challenges, to get people to understand who we are and who some of the other players are. It's a quick graphic. We are taking water, the City of Cleveland's Division of Water is taking water out of Lake Erie. That's our drinking water supply for the vast majority of the service area. They take water, there's intakes that are 3 to 3.5 miles offshore, 4 of them. You can see one from downtown, the orange, looks like a freighter, but it's actually an intake. That's the 5-mile crib, which is actually 3.5 miles, I think, offshore. But so we take in water, Cleveland cleans it up, pumps it. Some are pumped, some are gravity feeds. You use the water at your home, and industry uses the water. Now we produce what we call wastewater. Stuff from the sink, stuff from the toilets, stuff from industry. That wastewater has collected a significant amount of contamination. We need to clean it up. We have EPA permit limits for a whole host of pollutant parameters that dictate exactly what the maximum amount of any given pollutant we can discharge to the waterways. So we have a treatment process, 3 treatment plants, and you'll see those today, and we'll talk about those. We need to clean it up before we discharge that treated water to Lake Erie. Remember, you're drinking that water. And the aquatic environment, the fish and all the organisms in Lake Erie need clean water to survive. So we are the regional entity that collects and treats wastewater, Cleveland Water, delivers clean water, drinking water to your houses. All the local communities own, operate, maintain the smaller sanitary and combined and storm sewers in the streets in the neighborhood. Now we're going to get into the guts of Sewer System 101. This is the way the nation and Cleveland disposed of waste way back in the day. Collected it in their house and dumped it on the street or in the backyard. Obviously, over time, that's going to cause some problems. In some areas, I think we evolved from taking it in a bucket and dumping it on the street to going to the outhouse and doing our business in the outhouse. And you know, that worked for a while, but again, outhouses get filled and they start to smell, and obviously there's water quality problems that can be created through this innovation. Way back in the 1800s, so the waste was on the streets, and we were starting to build the city. We were starting to build outward. So there were streets that were starting to be laid and more pavement. And during the early 1800s, the mid-1800s, growing cities built storm sewers primarily to prevent street flooding, to get that water off the street and somewhere else where it's not bothering someone. You can see in this construction photo, the oldest sewers in the city of Cleveland were hand mined for the most part, built out of brick, and they're egg-shaped in size, which is kind of unique. Now this was the creation that really started things going, the crapper. You know, the first toilet. I think this is vintage 18, I don't know, I don't see the date, but we're talking about the 1850s, 60s. Mr. Crapper invented a way to flush the waste from your house, get it away from you. It's a waste preventer, I guess it was called. So that creation with water, the delivery of water to the residents of Cleveland, started to create much more waste that needed to be dealt with. So in the 1880s and 90s, sanitary sewers from your houses, those little laterals, the pipes from your house, they were connected to those storm drains. And the reason was it was a mess on the streets. There's crap on the streets from the crapper. And we needed to get that waste off the street. That's a health problem. So they started to connect the house laterals to these interceptors to get them off the streets, away from the people, and they started to divert those flows to a nearby water body, which at that time sounded like the right thing to do. There was no treatment plants back then. It was just collect the waste, collect the storm water, get it away from people, get it to the nearest body of water. Now this is a quote, I think his name was Robert, I'm not sure if it was Robert, but Herring, City of Cleveland, back in 1882, and he theorized that combined sewers was really the matter of choice. He called it a matter of choice because there was so much organic matter and junk on the streets. And I think there were still horses rolling around at some point. So you had a bunch of organic matter on the streets, and you had a lot of waste that was being generated because of inventions like the crapper and water coming to your house. So the volume of wastewater was increasing. And he felt that it was not wise to separate those flow streams. Rather, we should collect them in one flow stream, in one pipe, and get them away from the people. So that was really the evolution of what we called combined sewers in the city of Cleveland. So between the late 1800s and early to mid 1900s, intercepting sewers were constructed to start to intercept these waste flows and delivered those flows. So there was a piecemeal construction of sewers to get the flow away from the people. Then we wanted to consolidate all these piecemeal sewers into what we call an interceptor. and get it to the lake or get it to the Cuyahoga River in a convenient spot. A little hard to see, but to the right, the green lines are the routes of the first interceptor sewers that were constructed in the city of Cleveland. And keep in mind, there were no treatment plants at this time. So the thought at the time was, let's collect the waste and get it to the nearest water body, because dilution is the solution to pollution. And that's what they did. Now, interestingly enough, the locations of these interceptors and where they outfall to the river are really the exact locations of the Easterly, Westerly, and Southerly treatment plants today. So our interceptors are the highways of the sewer system. They collect waste. At that time, they collected wastewater and took it right to the river or the lake. Today, they collect waste from the community sewers and take that waste to our treatment plants. And again, dilution is the solution to pollution. That was the mantra. You know, I'm a lifelong Clevelander, and I remember in the late 60s and the early 70s, some of the bumper stickers that said that. Dilution is the solution to pollution. And what we've learned over time is that is not true. And it certainly wasn't true back then, and they quickly realized that taking waste to 3 points along the lake and the river was not the right solution. So as treatment plants were constructed in this area, nationally, I think this area led some of the earliest treatment plants across the country were constructed here. So, and there's great debate as to who was first, Easterly, Westerly, Southerly, and what was the first date. But some of the rudimentary treatment plants were constructed as early as 1920s. In 38, some of the more sophisticated plants that we see today were constructed at those 3 outfall locations, because it was now felt that we've got to treat this waste. It's harming Lake Erie, it's harming the Cuyahoga River, and we've got to do something about it. So now we're going to talk more about the combined sewer system and its evolution. As the area continued to grow, devices were built into the combined sewer system called regulators. You think of them as a dam. These regulators allow flow to go to the treatment plant in dry weather and in wet weather. But because there was a lot of street flooding and basement flooding when these combined sewers filled up, some of that flow was allowed to overflow to the nearest water body. And it was really to keep it out of the basements or out of the streets. And those are called combined sewer overflows. This is what it looks like inside the pipe. There's a couple different configurations, these regulating structures. You've got side spill weirs to the left, overflow pipes to the top right. In dry weather, the flows are typically pretty low in the system, and all the flow gets to the treatment plant. When it rains like today, those combined sewers start to fill up because of the street runoff. And what we see is the flows in the sewer elevate. They get to a point where to the left there's a weir, a long weir. It's like a dam. Once they exceed the height of that dam, that's a combined sewer overflow. Those flows are no longer going to the treatment plant, they're going to the nearest water body. And all of our urban streams in our service area receive at least one combined sewer overflow, and many of them, like the Cuyahoga, Mill Creek, and others, receive numerous combined sewer overflows. A couple other configurations, perpendicular weirs and leaping weirs. Again, the dry weather flow path in the perpendicular weir, it takes it bounces the flow perpendicularly and takes it to the treatment plant. Leaping weirs in low flow, it's like an open trough. You're looking at combined sewage in the trough. When the flows get high, the flows get up, and they actually leap that trough into a storm sewer, and it's kind of tough to see, but there's a storm sewer that goes out. So as the flows come up, some of that flow gets to the environment. A lot of that flow continues to go to the treatment plants. Newer configurations, back in the 70s, the district and I think Milwaukee were some of the first pioneers of what we call automated regulators. Some of the bigger interceptors that had a lot of capacity to store flow during wet weather, we built automated devices, either inflatable dams or hydraulically operated gates, and we raise the dams when it's going to rain to allow the flow to back up and fill the pipe to a point where we're preventing overflow, and then once the rain is ceased, all of that flow can discharge to our treatment plants. This is an example of an inflatable dam, partially inflated, but as the bag comes up, the flow ponds behind it. If we didn't have the bag, that flow might overflow to the environment. So this was a measure that was performed in the 70s and 80s to start whittling away the combined sewer overflow totals that this region faced. And back at our inception, we're estimating over 9 billion gallons of combined sewer overflow. We're talking raw sewage mixed with stormwater was overflowing to the environment. This is what it looks like when it hits a stream, and this is kind of an odd photo. It looks very picturesque, doesn't it? That water flowing over those rocks coming out of that flap gate looks great. That's combined sewer overflow. That's a raw sewage discharge. Now the good news, and this is on Mill Creek. This is at the Mill Creek Falls. Now the good news about this is this was once a very frequent actor. I think this one overflowed at least 100 million gallons per year, and numerous times. On a day like today, it'd be overflowing. Through the construction of the district's Mill Creek Combined Sewer Overflow Tunnel and a number of other ancillary projects, that overflow is gone. It's physically gone. The flap gate's removed. The rocks were reconstructed, and it's actually an overlook. I believe it's a Metro Parks overlook, which is a really good thing. I mean, it's a nice gain forward. This is the location. The map is color-coded green, easterly service area, the pinkish southerly treatment plant area that goes in the combined sewer system, and the yellowish color goes to westerly. The red dots are the locations where the combined sewer overflows can hit an area waterway. So you can see some of the rivers like the Cuyahoga, Doan Brook, the lakefront, Mill Creek, Big Creek, receive an appreciable number of combined sewer discharges. But all of the other urban streams in our area, Dugway Brook, 9 Mile, Euclid Creek, Green Creek, there's others, receive at least one or multiple discharges. Combined sewer overflows, CSOs impact water quality. Because you have a mix of wastewater with stormwater, and if you think about stormwater, it is not pure. In an urban environment, stormwater running off the streets or your yards is contaminated with metals, brake lining, oils, greases, dog poop, the natural environment. So stormwater is also contaminated. One of the biggest water quality issues that combined sewer overflows cause is the bacteria issue. And obviously that impairs recreation, particularly at our beaches. And we have beaches, particularly Euclid Beach, that have very high E. coli levels after a rain event. And that's not a good thing. We are heavily involved in monitoring those beaches, and there are appropriate public notification programs and postings that are out there to warn the public about bacteria levels at beaches. Combined sewer overflows are only one of a number of other sources of bacteria to those waterways, but they're obviously a very big source of bacteria when you have 9 billion gallons of discharge in a typical year. Aesthetics are another problem. Anything you can flush down your toilet or go down the sink can make it into the combined sewer system, and once it's there, it can top one of those weir structures and go to the environment. So floatables, we call these floatables. And some of those floatables are quite objectionable, and you can think, if you think hard about what's going down the toilet, you can think about what's going to the environment. So floatables are more of an aesthetic issue. We've constructed certain facilities, we call them netting facilities, to strain and screen and collect floatables before they get to the waterways. Bottom line is we have to reduce the discharge to get rid of this aesthetic nuisance. This is the mouth of Kingsbury Run at the Cuyahoga River. That's oil and grease on the top of the waterway. Now, we investigated this. This is an example of what can get out. This happened to be a dry weather situation, and I'm not gonna name names, but we looked around. We've got water quality investigators that tried to figure out where's this coming from. And we found an entity that was dumping the oily waste into a catch basin on their property. They thought the catch basin was tied to the combined sewer system. They were wrong. And so we have episodic issues like this. It's not like it used to be when the river was burning, but that's obviously not a good situation as well. We have a combined sewer overflow consent decree. The US EPA back in 1994 adopted a policy. It's called the Combined Sewer Overflow Control Policy, and it's codified in the Clean Water Act. That policy requires us and any community with combined sewer overflows to reduce the discharge. So there's very stringent guidelines on what communities need to do. We developed our plans, we discussed our plans with the federal government. We have a court-ordered consent decree that calls for the significant reduction of combined sewer overflows, $3 billion program over 25 years. Way back in the 70s, we were at 9 billion gallons. We've cut it in half, even a little more than half. And we're going to continue to cut that total significantly. But to get from 9 to a little less than half, that's a $3 billion endeavor. And we expect to see significant water quality gains because of that investment. Without getting too technical, this pie chart just gives you some idea of the types of projects that go into the $3 billion program. The blue, light blue, are the tunnels. That's really the guts of our program is to build large storage tunnels underground and take those overflows that we're discharging to the stream, drop them into the tunnel. The tunnel, it's a large, 24-foot diameter. Euclid Creek was our latest. So these are very large. They can hold 70 million gallons or more of overflow. We drop the overflows into the tunnel, so they're not going to the stream anymore, which is good. The tunnel holds those flows, and we take them to our treatment plant for full treatment, which is also good. So that's a very significant water quality gain in any area that we're working on combined sewer overflow management. There's a number of other projects. There are green infrastructure projects that the district has been pursuing and will continue to pursue. One of the ways you can manage combined sewer overflows is get stormwater out of the combined sewer system. And where there are available properties and green space to allow the rainwater to percolate or slow it down and hold it for a while, we're taking advantage of those opportunities. This graphic shows the general routes and locations of the tunnels that will be built over the next 25 years. Mill Creek is not on here. It is finished. That tunnel, Mill Creek used to have about 500 million gallons of combined sewer overflow per year. I think we've cut it to less than 15 million gallons, which is a big step forward. The Euclid Creek Tunnel, which runs along the lakefront from the treatment plant near our Easterly treatment plant out to Euclid Creek, is finished. It's not operational. That tunnel will need to be pumped out because it's very deep, a couple 100 feet deep. So we'll need to pump that stored flow to our treatment plant. The pump station should be finished in 2016. So that tunnel will be put online next year. There are very large combined sewer overflows along the lakefront and some very significant ones along Euclid Creek. So once we remove those combined sewer discharges, we're going to continue to watch the beach and the bacteria levels, and we hope to see a significant gain as those overflows are reduced. There'll be tunnels. The Dugway Tunnel, which runs along Dugway Brook, is next. That is under construction, I believe. Doane Valley will follow. That's under design. So there'll be a tunnel to deal with Doane Valley combined sewer overflows. We're going to move to the Westerly district and construct a tunnel along the west side of the Cuyahoga River. And then Big Creek and Southerly are the two that end the program. But these are very significant tunnels. We're talking about 20 to 24 feet in diameter. Go ahead.
Are all the other cities around Lake Erie doing the same thing?
Everybody's doing variations.
Are they in a similar situation?
Yeah. You know, there's a number, it depends, and each sewer system has a different lay of the land. Most of the major municipalities with big combined sewer overflows are constructing tunnels as a key component. Most are doing green infrastructure as a key component. You look, while you're doing the planning, you look for ways to improve the existing system. That's the cheapest. So if I can raise that weir a little bit higher and not flood anybody out, we want to do that. And so we had early action projects that did that. There's a lot of pump stations in the system. If I can add a pump and in wet weather can pump a little bit more without flooding people, we're going to do that too. And we've got a number of those projects as well. Most of the big municipalities have tunnels as a key component of the system. And there's economy of scale. You know, there's good and bad with tunnels. It's a lot of gray infrastructure, but there's an economy of scale in terms of the cost to capture a lot of overflow. Go ahead.
We have lots of storages here. So what are like the wastewater treatment plant capacities?
Okay, that's a very good question. And so while we plan to control overflows in the system, if you've got, at the time of the discussion with EPA, we had 4.5 billion gallons annually to collect. So we're going to bring more flow to the treatment plants. And treatment plants get stressed in wet weather as well. They have a certain dry weather capacity. For instance, Southerly may run at about, let's say 100 to 120 million gallons per day in dry weather. We've had flows closing in on 1 billion in severe wet weather events. So we analyzed the treatment plants as well. What types of flows are we seeing currently? What type of stress do those flows put on our ability to treat? What will the combined sewer overflow program bring, and what should we do at the treatment plant? So I think, I'm not sure if it was, there are a number of plant improvements on this graphic. I think it's the 310 million gallon, dollar total. So there are some significant upgrades at the treatment plants to provide some more capacity and treatment ability in wet weather so that the treatment plants can continue to perform. So that's a key component. So that was a good question, very good question. Okay. Bid at 198, came in at 195, which is good. And this tunnel is finished, it's waiting for flow. As soon as that pump station is complete in 2016, sometime during 2016, we will turn that tunnel on and start to see overflow discharges going into the tunnel and away from the beach. That's what a cutter head, that is the cutter head on the Euclid Creek Tunnel. I think they named it Mackenzie. There's diamond bits on the cutter heads. We dropped this machine, I think the machine is 300 to 600 feet in length. It's dropped into the tunnel, constructed in the tunnel, and then, the mole is in the hole and it goes for 3 miles. It takes 2 to 3 years to mine out. And we're about between 120 and 200 feet deep. So this machine is mining in rock. A little hard to see. That's the cutter head breaking through at the terminus of the project. And obviously for the construction workers, this is a big day. So they've got a big ceremony going on. But that's the cutter head coming through. This project worked beautifully. And tunneling underground can be tough, but this, we had no major issues, on schedule and under budget. And that's what it looks like inside. These tunnels are lined. Once you mine, and it's shale, Chagrin shale. Once you mine it, you line it. It's a concrete liner that followed the machine step by step as they were mining. And that gives you some scale for how big these tunnels are.
For the mining, did that go through any residential area? Like, what did it feel like to have that thing going under your street?
Typically, we try to stay within the right-of-way. We don't like to mine under houses and structures, but we have to, because you cannot turn mining machines on a dime. There's certain radiuses and curves. We're a couple hundred feet deep. Sometimes there's blasting involved. Where there's blasting, we do pre-surveys for the residents to make sure that there's no damage caused by our tunnels. When you're 200 feet down, the impact at the surface is typically negligible or non-existent. It just depends on your depth and the type of mining you do. But the district is very careful, particularly if we're going to get into blasting. If you have things like sandstone, it's very difficult for the mining machine to cut. So you've got to blast. So you've got to do a lot of homework to prevent any damage at the surface. So these are the locations of the green infrastructure, the big projects that the district's undertaking. And again, the use of green infrastructure, what we're trying to do is pull water out of the combined sewer system or slow it down, infiltrate some of the water, keep it out of the combined sewer system. If you can keep water out, that's less potential for water to overflow during a rain event. This is an example of a green infrastructure opportunity at the Marriott redevelopment. This is in University Circle area. There's sand underneath this site. Now, our area is pretty heavily laid with clay, which is not great for infiltration. There are sand pockets, old beach ridges. This area happened to have sand underneath, so it was ripe for infiltration to take the stormwater off the parking lots and the impervious surfaces and send that water into the sand and keep it out of the system. This thing's worked beautifully. It's been in operation a couple years now, and there's been no stormwater runoff coming from the site up to 100-year storms. And we've been heavily monitoring this. So that site would have generated pretty significant amount of stormwater runoff before the technology was put in to the combined sewer system. We're not seeing it. So that's a good example. Now, we don't have that opportunity everywhere, but where we do, we want to take advantage of it. Public Square, you've heard a lot about Public Square, transforming Public Square. We wanted to make sure at Public Square, since you're creating green spaces, changing the landscape of Public Square, we want to make sure we do the right things to capture stormwater through green infrastructure, either reuse it, hold it, get rid of it. So there are some significant district investments in the Public Square project to use green infrastructure technologies to pull water out of the combined sewer system. We've got a quick video that explains some of the work at Public Square.
Dave Ritter, Stormwater Technical Specialist with the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. Today we're here at Public Square to take a look at the rainwater harvesting and infiltration system that's going in as part of the project. Originally, the runoff from Public Square was caught in catch basins and directed to the combined sewer system. The combined sewer system during dry weather flows to our Easterly wastewater treatment plant. During large storm events, it was designed to overflow, and those overflows went directly to Lake Erie. The sewer district saw this as an opportunity to capture stormwater in a highly urbanized environment, and was able to work with the group plan commission to leverage the work that was already going on here at Public Square. There are two systems that are going in as part of the Public Square project. The one behind me is the rainwater harvesting and infiltration system. Rainwater runoff from the site is going to be captured and reused for irrigation. During the times of the year when irrigation isn't necessary, the water will overflow and infiltrate into the ground itself, thereby capturing about 1.6 million gallons. Between the two systems, the rainwater harvesting and infiltration system, and then the perimeter permeable paver tree infiltration system, is designed to capture about 3 million gallons a year. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do some improvements right in a highly urbanized downtown area to remove stormwater runoff from our combined sewer system. Yeah. So it doesn't look like they're super far along.
Okay, so that's it on combined sewer systems and combined sewer overflow. The combined sewer system essentially brought the region from waste on the streets to waste that was being directed to treatment plants. But as the area continued to build out, we're laying more streets, more property, more impervious surface, so there's more stormwater runoff. So combined sewer overflows came to be because of the outmigration and the building out of our region. as we continued to build out, now we're into the 1900s, separate sewer systems came to be in this region. A separate sewer system differs from combined sewer system in that we have two separate sewers. One's a sanitary sewer that collects waste from your homes and industry, takes that waste to a treatment plant via a sanitary sewer. And a storm sewer is also in the street to collect rainfall runoff from streets and from your properties. And the storm sewers are routed to the nearest stream or directly to Lake Erie. Separate sewers evolved over time, not just here in Cleveland, but nationally, although there's some unique sewer systems that are in the Cleveland area and a little bit in northern Kentucky that are kind of unique to this area. And I really don't know why. Perhaps it was the contractor at the time. But the first evolution was to take, instead of a combined sewer, let's build a separate sanitary and storm, but let's just dig one trench. And obviously I think it was a cost savings. And there's a lot of rock in certain areas, so it can be very expensive to mine through rock. But they put the sanitary and the storm sewer in the same trench. Now when you dig a trench, trenches fill with water. So the problem is, even though you have a separate sanitary and storm sewer, because they're in the same trench, there's a lot of potential for intermingling of flows. These are the three main arrangements. To the left, you have a common trench system with separate manholes for access. So you can access your storm sewer for maintenance, you can access the sanitary for maintenance. These in the common trench systems are probably the least problematic. A little more problematic is the common trench in the middle. Sometimes they constructed two sewers in the same trench, one manhole for access, but you can see the weir wall between the storm sewer, which is the larger pipe to the top, and the sanitary sewer, which is the smaller pipe at the bottom. And the theory was not unlike combined sewer systems. At times you're going to need something to overflow. So they built weir structures to allow the overflow. Now we're going to be studying this arrangement in a lot of detail in some upcoming studies. And our fear is sometimes it's probably the storm sewer that's overflowing into the sanitary instead of vice versa. And that's not a good thing. That creates basement flooding potentials. So we're going to look at that arrangement. The last arrangement is called the over-under system. This is pretty unique to this area in northern Kentucky. These gotta go, in my opinion. They're just really bad systems. They cause nothing but problems. And what you have is the storm sewer on the top. Now I'm looking at the right, on the right graphic. Storm sewer on the top, a removable plate between the storm sewer and the sanitary sewer for maintenance purposes, and a smaller sanitary sewer underneath. Well, the problem with these systems is the plate, the older plates weigh a lot. It takes a lot to take them off. And once you take that thing off, you're not too excited about picking it up and putting it back on. And so sometimes the plates are missing. Or sometimes the pressure of flow in the system can dislodge the plates. And when you have that, you've got great potential for the storm sewer to flood the sanitary and cause basement flooding. You also have potential for the reverse. These flows are intermingling, so those sanitary wastewater flows will get into the storm water and get out to the environment. That's what the plate looks like. That's a plate to the left, lower left, that's kind of intact. These are large plates. So there's the plate in place. No flow in the storm sewer, which is above the plate. You cannot see the sanitary. There's a plate that's missing to the top right. That's sanitary wastewater that you're looking at. And you're in a storm sewer. So if it starts raining and the plate is missing, all of the flow is going to pour into the sanitary sewer initially, causing problems. The sanitary will become overloaded. It could start to pressurize, which floods basements and perhaps forces sanitary water out of the hole into the storm sewer, and now you're discharging a bunch of crap to the streams. So that was the evolution from combined to separate. The true separate systems where we built sewers in separate trenches was the next evolution. They even predate the 60s, I'm sure, in certain areas. But now we started to dig separate trenches, one for the sanitary, one for the combined. So these tend to be tighter systems, but these are very old systems in our area. Some are approaching 80 plus years or 100 years old. So there are a number of other problems which we'll talk about. Separate sewer problems. Just because you have two sewers doesn't mean you have no problems. We have plenty of problems across our service area in the separate sewer area. There's a number of things that can happen. First is cross connections. Your downspouts on your house are supposed to be connected to the storm sewer lateral, the little pipe that comes off your property. So all that rooftop's not supposed to be in the sanitary sewer, it's supposed to be in the storm sewer. In some areas it's not. And in fact, in the transition, I think some of the engineers back in the day felt because we're taking all that storm water out of the system, we're not gonna have a combined sewer, that the junk in the, the stuff you flush down the toilet is gonna settle. And we need some flushing capacity to flush that waste so that you don't muddy up your sewer system and block it up. So they intentionally connected footer drains, foundation drains, or downspouts, because that was the thought at the time. So you really can't fault them. So those downspouts in sanitary sewers cause problems. We have other problems on sanitary sewers. Because we have the wrong connections, we have storm sewers tied to sanitaries, but we also have an issue where a lot of the sanitary sewers from the homes are tied to the storm sewer. So people are flushing their toilets to the stream. And this is a bigger problem than you might think. And it depends, if a contractor comes out to fix a problem and you don't have good inspection, they're gonna tie that pipe to the closest pipe they can see. And sometimes it's the right one, sometimes it's the wrong one. And so we call these illicit discharges, and we're very diligent at finding these, looking for these, working with communities to get these corrected. It should not be happening in the 21st century, people flushing toilets to the stream. But it happens. Go ahead.
So how, if homeowners, and particularly in the inner city where people have a lot of older homes, how can they find out what their connections are?
That's a great question. You can, I believe, work with your community officials. You can do dye testing. You can do dye testing.
So we have to pay a plumber, and then.
Right. Now, most people are not going to go to that expense. We're the ones that find it at the outfalls. Most of the houses are connected properly. So it's not, I hate to use the term pervasive. There's a lot of them. There's more of them than there needs to be. But it's very difficult how we find them. If we see flow at the outfall where the storm sewer goes to the stream, we sample the flow in dry weather. If there's flow coming out in dry weather, might be a problem. So we take a sample, our lab analyzes it for E. coli. If we get very high E. coli levels, now we start to investigate the sewer system to find out where is it coming from. So what we do, and we work with the communities on this, is internal inspection. We televise sometimes to look for evidence of a lateral where you can see it, or we'll start to dye test homes or industry or commercial properties. We introduce dye into the toilet. If we see the dye in the storm sewer, we know they're improperly connected. So that's typically how you do it.
So how does that impact the homeowner, the property owner? Will they get charged?
Every community does it differently, but typically it's a violation of a community code.
Right.
And that can be a dicey issue, but it's a violation of a community code, and most times the communities require the homeowner to deal with it.
I have a question, just a general scenario. Let's say downstream of a separate sewer system, you have a combined system that separate system ultimately dumps into. But upstream of where the separate ties into the combined, where it is still separate, you find an illicit discharge, but ultimately it goes to a combined system. Do you still consider that cross connection illicit discharge, being that it ultimately winds up in a combined system, although it's separate upstream?
Our position at the sewer district is we can't authorize that. Your code doesn't authorize that, and we can't authorize that as well. There's regulations, the Phase 2 stormwater rules call for communities to look for and correct illicit discharges, so that it's a good thing that it's at least captured, but that also means it can overflow to the environment. So we don't authorize it. We've worked with, I'm not gonna name communities, but there are communities where our position is you should correct that.
At the point of
Yes.
the discharge?
Yes, yes. Okay? And these illicit connections can turn these streams all colors of the rainbow. And it's actually quite a bad thing. We're working hard to correct them. We've made some progress, but this will always be an ongoing effort. We have some locations, more than some, quite a few, in fact, hundreds, where just like combined sewers, there were devices built into sanitary sewers to allow them to overflow to the nearest storm sewer. Typically the arrow, sometimes they have to go uphill, but most times they don't. But there's a number of weird devices or overflow pipes in the separate sewer system to, again, prevent, primarily, it's really basement flooding from occurring. As the system built out, the system grew, the capacity of the sanitary sewers started to be compromised. These sewers got old. They have cracks and leaks. I think one thing people need to understand when we talk about sewers, 50% of the sewer system by length is on private property, roughly. You know, it can be, but roughly 50-50 split. So the homeowners own that portion of the sewer system. The public entity owns the sewers in the right-of-way. And when the sewers age, the cracks and leaks in a sewer system can be on either, and are on both sides of the fence. And it's tough to deal with private property issues, has been over the years, so to correct basement flooding issues is a real dicey proposition because of it's at times the reluctance of certain communities to spend public money on private property and the reluctance of property owners to do the same. So it's a very tough situation, and it's not just here, it's nationally. So when we overload sanitary sewers, we see this, and we've seen a lot of this lately in every area. It's not concentrated in any one community. There are certain communities where sewers are older, where it can be a little more problematic, but you can have what we call surcharging manholes. You can blow manhole lids because the system is under pressure, because there's too much water in the sanitary sewer. So it'll either pop the manhole lid and spout geysers, or route flow and spout geysers in your basement and start to fill the basement with a combination of stormwater and wastewater. Obviously a huge health hazard and a big issue, and it's all caused by extraneous stormwater getting into the sanitary sewer system. This quick graphic depicts what we call, I call it infiltration and inflow. There are two sources. Infiltration is when there's cracks in manholes or pipes, either on private property or in the street. As these systems get old, and you know, some of them are approaching 100 years old, so there's cracks, there's settling, things deteriorate over time. When there's a crack in a pipe and the pipe's in a groundwater, is in the ground and there's groundwater infiltrates, finds its way into the sanitary sewer. It finds its way on your lawn, it finds its way in the street. Inflow is more of a direct connection, lots of water. So that's your downspout. It's supposed to be in the storm sewer system. Sometimes the downspout comes into the sanitary sewer. not a good thing. The capacity, you didn't build capacity for downspouts in your sanitary sewer. Same thing in the streets. You see the catch basins that collect the street runoff? Once in a while, for whatever reason, a street catch basin is tied to a sanitary sewer. And obviously, that's a huge influx of stormwater and can quickly overwhelm a system. So those are some of the reasons why basement flooding occurs or overflows occur. That's inflow. That's actually green inflow. That's a dye test right there. You've got a dye test going on. But they've isolated, I don't know what it is, a downspout or a catch basin, but a pretty appreciable amount of water that's flowing into the system. So what communities and sewer districts need to do is get rid of that. Find ways to get rid of that. Pipe it to the storm sewer. Get it out of the sanitary. Infiltration is more insidious, I guess. It's cracks and leaks. That's what it looks like. Now, we flooded a storm sewer, I believe, here, and televised the sanitary, and you're seeing infiltration coming in. And this is all across the system, so it's tough to isolate at times. But over time, it grows, it grows, it grows, and as it grows, more water gets into the sanitary sewer, and more basements get flooded. Go ahead.
So the water that's infiltrating is coming from groundwater?
Typically groundwater. When it rains, particularly when it rains, some of these sewers aren't so deep, so they call it, what is it, rainfall-induced infiltration. When it's raining, you can expect to see more of this, particularly on the front lawn. The lateral on your lawn isn't that deep. And wherever there's a crack, and particularly when it rains, you're going to see extraneous water getting into the sanitary. If the pipe is sitting in the groundwater table, you're going to see it all the time. And that's why when we're out on the streams and we see storm sewers with flow, we check it. And sometimes there's no contamination because it's groundwater getting into the system. Other times it's sky high in E. coli because of the illicit discharges that are going on. Okay?
I have another question.
Okay.
So if groundwater is infiltrating into the sewer pipe or even the rainwater, how does that affect the plant life that needs that groundwater to live or needs that rain infiltration? So it's being basically siphoned out of the soil, right?
Yeah, typically though, not at a rate that's going to cause, I've never heard of any issues.
Okay.
One of the issues though that you do hear about is where there's too much siphoning of water going on because of gross cracks and leaks and say offset joints or collapsed pipes, sinkholes. If you don't address those over time, you've got water continuing to erode. It's just like a stream, except it's underground. And that's how sinkholes tend to develop, where you've got problems and water repetitively taking soil away. And that soil was put on top of sewers to keep the sewer intact. And once you lose that structural stability, boom. And we've seen sinkholes, and we've seen sinkholes in this area as well. And we seem to be seeing more of those. And it's a combination of the system aging and the rainfall patterns. Okay, so just in review, in our service area, we have 3 types of sewer systems. Most communities, well, there's about 700 or 800 communities across the country that have combined sewer systems. All the newer communities across the country have separate sewer systems. The common trench system that we have in our area is fairly unique to Northeast Ohio. I've heard about it in northern Kentucky. There's got to be some other pockets in other communities, but it's not as pervasive nationally as it appears to be here. And all 3 of these sewer systems have their own unique problems. Somebody asked a question about where these sewers are. Let me see if I can get this right. The yellowish, those are the areas served by combined sewer systems. So those are the oldest sewers in the service area. I think the oldest sewer, 1860 something. We've got plans for an 1860-ish vintage combined sewer. So that's where they laid pipe first. Then we move into the the blue, the light blue highlighted areas are where the common trench systems were built. So it seemed like a transition in construction technique. Let's build 2 sewers in 1 trench. So you can see the ring of suburban communities that have common trench systems. When we get to the outlying suburban communities, we start to see separate sewer systems. They're color-coded red are sewers that have, areas that have 2 sewers, a sanitary and a storm. But our analysis, some testing we've done, indicates that the sanitary sewers are taking on a lot of water. And it could be a matter of the age of those pipes. It could be what I talked about earlier, where some of the design practices, wow, we're gonna build a separate sanitary, it's gonna slow the flow down, there's gonna be low flow. We gotta put something in there to flush those solids out, so let's connect the downspouts. That could be a factor too. The green areas are our separate trench systems, 2 pipes, that appear to be a little bit tighter. And the reason was the downspout connection ceased to sanitaries, and they're just newer pipes in those communities. And then when we really get to the outlying periphery, the pinkish or magenta, whatever, areas are served by septic systems, so they have no sewer system at this time. So that gives you a good layout of sewers across our service area. I will say this though, there are sewer-related problems, basement flooding, illicit discharges, and overflows in any of these areas. That problem is pretty pervasive. To put it in perspective, just to get back to, we are a regional entity, we've got the highways, the interceptors. So we've got about 312 miles of pipe. And we're dealing with wastewater treatment plants, making sure the interceptors are functional, and dealing with the combined sewer overflow issue. That's on the district's plate. In the communities, there's at least 10 times, there's more than 10 times the amount of pipe, sanitary and combined sewer pipe. And these are just sanitary and combined sewers, and these are just the lengths in the public right-of-way. This doesn't include miles of pipe on private property. You can essentially double that total. And those are the responsibility of the communities. So when we have basement flooding, when we have illicit discharges, when we have septic tank issues, those fall on the community to deal with it. But obviously these systems are linked. So we've got to work together to solve the problems that exist.
Question.
Yeah.
Now with the district-owned pipe and the locally owned pipe, $3 billion covers the district-owned pipe, or does it cover both district and locally owned?
The $3 billion of investment are targeted at, it's really more district-owned facilities. So it's pipes or overflows. All of those overflows, combined sewer overflows, we're building new pipes or new facilities at treatment plants to reduce combined sewer overflow discharge. Now, sometimes, in conjunction with the district project to capture those overflows, there's upsizing of pipes that provide community benefit in terms of relieving flows along some of the bigger community pipes in the system. So sometimes there's relief for flooding, but the primary purpose of the district's $3 billion program is to take overflows that are going to the lake or the streams and capturing them and treating them at our plants. But when we do the studies, we obviously look at the interaction between district pipes and local pipes. And when there's the possibility to improve local pipe performance, we do so. Now, when you look at the local system, I hate to hit you with big numbers, but the repair and renewal of the local system, you were really just going to repair and renew the 3,100 miles, you're looking at $3 billion plus as well. So staged over time, there has to be investment by the communities to make sure that their local systems continue to function as well. The district has made some huge inroads, particularly with the interceptors. We built interceptors in the 90s and into the 80s, 90s, and into the early 2000 timeframe. The Heights Hilltop, the Southwest Interceptor, the Cuyahoga Valley Interceptor, and the Northwest Interceptor were all built to provide more capacity regionally to accept more local flow. So when we built the bigger pipes to allow more wet weather flow to flow to our treatment plants, that relieved many portions of the local system. So we solved some basement flooding problems and some overflow problems in certain areas, but the system just keeps getting older, so the game is never over. So we've got to have investment on both sides of the table. Okay? So obviously it's raining today. This is the big issue. Rainfall and the level of service, and what are you going to do to prevent basement flooding? What are you going to do to prevent combined sewer or separate sewer overflows from occurring? It all costs money. It takes significant investment. So how we're going to deal with changing rainfall patterns and aging sewer systems is a big issue here. And as we do studies, we look at what it might take to prevent flooding up to a 5-year storm or a 10 or a 25 or 100. And there are different types of projects, and they cost, significantly different sums of money. There's not a great appetite for rates and sewer fees, but I'm telling you, without them, we're going to wallow, and we don't want to wallow. So it's going to be a significant issue locally and nationally to continue to provide what we call a good level of service, keeping poop out of your basements, really, at a reasonable cost going forward. And this is a big national problem. Okay, I'm going to now shift to the latter part. We're going to go through wastewater treatment plant 101. Now we've collected the wastewater. We're starting to build facilities to prevent overflows, but we're delivering a lot of flow to our treatment plants. So these are some pictures of construction way back in the day. We were talking the 20s and 30s, where treatment plants were built locally. This is a real quick schematic of the treatment process. When we bring flows into a treatment plant, it's got a lot of junk in it. Sometimes, like now, leaves, rags, grit, junk. Preliminary treatment gets rid of the junk, the heavy stuff that can clog equipment, or the abrasive stuff like grit that can erode equipment. So that's what preliminary, get rid of the heavy stuff. Primary treatment slows the flow of water down and allows any solids that will readily settle to settle. Secondary treatment, because there's a lot of organics in the waste stream and other pollutants, we introduce microorganisms, bugs, that like to chew and feed on organics. And as they chew and feed on organics, they reduce the level of organics, and we allow them to settle out. And then at the end of the game, we disinfect. We use sodium hypochlorite, bleach, to kill off any E. coli organisms that remain before we discharge. These are our pictures. These are the pictures of the 3 treatment plants again. Westerly on the left, adjacent to Edgewater State Park. Southerly, which some of you will tour, in the middle. And Easterly is at East 140th and Lakeshore Boulevard. Southerly discharges to the Cuyahoga River. Easterly, westerly go to Lake Erie. There's the breakdown of the 90 billion gallons that we treat annually. Southerly has the bulk of it. It has most of the population. Both easterly and westerly treatment plants serve a much smaller population, but still treat a significant amount of flow during the year.
Frank?
Yes?
I know there's a lot of construction right now at the Easterly plant. How's that gonna compare to Southerly when all of that's done,
Southerly's going to have its fair share. They're all 3 treatment plants. We will build some facilities to augment, to increase the wet weather treatment capacities, like your question earlier. We're going to build some facilities to make those treatment plants have the ability to treat more wet weather flow annually. So we looked at what the combined sewer system might bring, what the treatment plants can do, what the regulations say, and we're gonna upsize the capacity at all 3 units. So there'll be significant construction at all 3 plants.
Is that chemically enhanced high rate treatment?
Chemically enhanced high-rate treatment at all 3 plants. Some upsizing of the secondary capacity at Easterly. Same thing at Southerly, we're gonna increase the amount of the secondary units. Take Southerly from 400 million gallons per day to 615 or 625. So again, we're gonna walk through, I got some pictures for each of these treatment processes. There's a wet stream, you know, you're treating the wastewater. There's also a solid stream at the treatment plants. Once you drop things out, that's a lot of solids that we collect, and we have to deal with that as well. You're gonna go to Southerly. I don't wanna get into a lot of detail, but you can see, you know, there's a lot of detail at these treatment plants. From when you bring the water in at the head end in preliminary treatment, you send it to primary, you go to secondary, and finally you disinfect and go out. The red arrows are the solid stream, where you're dropping solids out in tanks, and you need to process. You need to remove those solids, get them out. And the light gray or blue, that's your wet stream, where the wastewater's going through units and getting cleansed as it goes from unit to unit to unit. And by the end of the show, after you've disinfected, we're sending what we call effluent, treated wastewater, back to Lake Erie or back to the Cuyahoga River, well below the standards that EPA, Ohio EPA sets for safe swimming, aquatic environment, and protection of public health. Preliminary treatment. The first thing that happens is the wastewater goes through bar racks. These are long vertical bars, different spacing, sometimes 2 inches apart, sometimes 3/4 inch apart. They've gotten smaller. The spacing between the bars has gotten smaller over history as there's much more emphasis at making sure the floatable materials are minimized. So the bar racks take the rags and junk out of the wastewater to protect downstream equipment. That's an example of a bar rack. That's the nasty stuff that bar racks scrape off. They used to hand scrape these things off way, way back, which was not a fun job. Now they're mechanically clean, but this is nasty stuff. The next step in preliminary treatment is grit removal, like coffee grounds, the junk off the streets. We have combined sewers, so the little particulates and rocks and junk that is flushed down toilets. The nastier stuff, it's abrasive. It settles pretty readily. If you don't remove it though, it will start to wear out pumps and pipes. So grit removal is the second preliminary treatment step. You've got an operating tank, aerated grit. We want to get as much of the organics off of the grit as possible. To the left is an empty tank. What happens is the grit settles out. The tanks are sloped to allow the grit to collect, and there's a series of rakes that continually move on a conveyor and rake out the grit for disposal. And that's what grit looks like going to disposal. It's very abrasive. I mean, it looks like coffee grounds. Half of it probably is, but that's what grit looks like. Primary treatment, these are the tanks at Southerly. These are Southerly's tanks. All we're doing is slowing the wastewater flow down. And when you slow the flow down, solids that want to settle will settle. So these can, the flow can be in these tanks for hours. I think Westerly's time of travel was, depending on the flow rate, 18 to 24 hours total for the whole plant. So there's a lot of what we call residence time to allow things to settle out. Secondary treatment, we're using bugs, microorganisms, to chew on organics and reduce organic pollution. If you don't, and you discharge organics to the water body, it robs the water body of oxygen. And that was the problem we had along the Cuyahoga and a lot of many streams way back in the 50s, 60s. We had no oxygen in the stream because there was too much organic pollution. So that's their job. We use aeration systems. These bugs need a lot of oxygen to thrive. So there's a lot of oxygen input into the system, air into the secondary treatment system to maintain a healthy bug population. And again, we settle. This is a circular clarifier here. Again, we slow the water down after the bugs have chewed on the organics, and again, settle more solids. Final step is disinfection. This is what we call a chlorine contact time. We apply sodium hypochlorite to the top right. And bleach. The chlorine needs time to interact with microorganisms, time and mixing to essentially kill off those microorganisms. So as the flow serpentines through the tanks, it gives it time for the kill to be produced. At the very end where the arrow is, we interject another chemical. It's called sodium bisulfite. If there's too much chlorine residual in the effluent going to the water body, it's going to cause a problem in the water body. Too much chlorine will kill off bugs, fish, and other things in the water body. So the sodium bisulfite just chews up all the chlorine. So there's essentially zero discharge going out. Solids handling, we're producing a lot of solids. When you have 500,000 people discharging to a treatment plant, there's a lot of solids being produced daily. So this is a big deal. It's very costly to deal with solids. We incinerate solids. Some people landfill, some people compost, some people land apply, some people incinerate. Each technology has its pluses and minuses. The district has been incinerating its solids prior to landfill from way back, and we've just constructed a new facility to deal with our solid streams at our treatment plants. That's our new renewable energy facility. It's a state-of-the-art incineration complex. You have a question?
So is there air pollution that results when you incinerate the solids?
Good question. Yes. Yes, there is. There are, when you're burning, you're obviously producing off gases. We're regulated under the Clean Air Act on the incineration stack gases. So in conjunction with the incineration process are the technologies that we have to build around incineration to essentially scrub out those stack gases to make sure that, and there's, just like a treatment plant, there are pollutant discharge limits on the stack gases that have to occur.
And each treatment
Yes.
plant has an incinerator?
No, all of our incineration, the vast majority of our incineration is done at our Southerly plant. And in fact, we have from the Easterly plant at East 140th all the way to Southerly, there's a sludge force main. They pump sludge underground via force main and process it at Southerly. And that was built a long time ago, well before I was at the district. Westerly has some incineration capability as well. We are regulated under the Clean Water Act for the stack gases.
A while back, some of the cities were looking at recycling sludge and reusing it as, what's happening with that? Is it not
Well,
practical?
you know, I remember
It was a
Lakewood.
big program.
I remember Lakewood used to sell it, you know, and you could pick up bags. The problem is because of the industrial nature, depends on your lay of the land again, and if you've got significant industry, sometimes the levels of metals or any given pollutant can be too high. Milwaukee has a process that they do sell some of it. It kind of comes and goes. I think it used to be more prevalent a long time ago. It may come back, but you're going to need to make sure that the levels of pollutants in the solids is acceptable for land application. So in some communities it works and in others it doesn't. Okay. Okay, that's it for, that was a real quickie on treatment plants. One more question?
So you mentioned a renewable energy facility. When you burn the solids, do you capture, does it turn a generator to produce electricity?
We have a turbine that is used with the off gases and steam. We generate some steam. We generate electricity with the turbine. And
you consume on site.
what's that?
You consume all of that on site.
Yeah, we're using that all on site. And the facility just became fully operational within the last year to two now. So we're continuing to fine tune that operation to get as much renewable energy as we can out of it. Okay, that's it for treatment plants. That was quick, and you're gonna see the treatment plant, some of you on the tour. I just wanted to end with a quick discussion of other stressors on our streams and on the lake. Watersheds, really, there's your definition of watersheds. It's really the lay of the land, the boundary that drains, when water falls on the land, that area that drains to a given stream. And we have all kinds of watersheds across the area. Those are the major ones, the Cuyahoga watershed in blue, Rocky to the left, Chagrin and Lake Erie tributaries. Those are the big watershed areas. So if water falls in the blue area, it's going to eventually get to the Cuyahoga River. There's a lot of smaller sub-watersheds. Mill Creek, Big Creek, West Creek, Euclid Creek, Green, Dugway, Doan, 9 Mile. There's a ton of watersheds, sub-watersheds in this region as well. And within this watershed area, there are significant streams that cross community boundaries. We use the term intercommunity drainage. And the district was charged with dealing with intercommunity drainage problems and developing a plan, implementing a plan to solve them. So flooding, erosion, water quality issues are all the types of problems that the district's program on the stormwater side seeks to solve. Those are the three big issues, and we're seeing more and more and more, and it's because there's more water and it gets there faster because there's more impervious surface and less percolation into the ground. We had a mandate back in 1975 for the district to develop a plan to solve intercommunity drainage issues, both storm and sanitary, across the district. And we talked about the interceptors. That was part of the plan to solve intercommunity sanitary and combined sewer issues. The district developed a regional stormwater management program to tackle the large stream issues, to tackle storm drainage problems. We have authority under Ohio 6119, that's our state statute that governs us. The board approved our program way back in 2010. We've been studying this forever. I have been on the stormwater case since '95, looking at this problem, and the problems are growing, and every storm brings more erosion problems and flooding problems. This is our stormwater service area. The program's not active today. We hope it will soon be active due to a recent Supreme Court ruling, but we'll be trying to tackle problems within this general area. Here's the nature of the problem: impervious surface. The dark areas are impervious surfaces across the area. That's a lot of impervious surface. And this is the simple equation of what happens with impervious surfaces. Basically, when you lay pavement, hard pavement, less rainfall can percolate downward. I mean, it's as simple as that. And when less percolates downward, more travels across the landscape in greater quantities and faster. And what we've done here is build storm sewers to get the water away from us as fast as possible. And when you do that, you introduce more storm water at higher rates and volumes to streams that really weren't sized to take it. So they tend to resize themselves, and they either flood, erode, and there's all kinds of water quality problems associated with them. So here's examples. It's pretty significant erosion. This is Chippewa Creek. You can see 1,000 pictures like this across the service area. This is Abrams Creek, Sheldon Road at the border, Middleburg Heights Brook Park. Routinely floods in a storm event. This is Warner Road, Mill Creek, caving in and was approaching Warner Road. Now the district made a temporary fix under its stormwater program to arrest that, but if you don't deal with it comprehensively, you lose Warner Road. There's been a lot of attempts to deal with it. This is a trash rack on Dugway Brook. It's collecting trash, but you have to maintain those facilities and remove the trash so it can continue to function. This is one of my favorites. This is Stickney Creek, the washer-dryer solution to erosion. Some property owner was attempting to arrest erosion through, washers and dryers, but when you look behind the washers and dryers, what do you see? You see more erosion. So a big rain event's gonna pick up one of those square pegs and put it in a round hole somewhere, in a culvert, and that's gonna be a problem. This is the Baldwin Creek guardrail 55-gallon drum tire solution. Well, these solutions don't last, and we have to do a lot better, and that's what the district's program is geared to do. There's a lot of problems. 228 million was the number we used in 2010. It's grown. It's larger than that. So it's a significant problem that needs to be solved. So under the stormwater program, to reduce impacts from stormwater to these streams into Lake Erie, we need to do good master plans to figure out what's going on and what's the best solution. We need to inspect and maintain the system on a daily basis because it's not happening now. We need to construct projects to solve problems, and we want to encourage good practices where we can to allow stormwater to do what it really wants to do, which is percolate downward. So the stormwater master plans will be developed by watershed area. This is an example, I think it's the Rocky. We're going to piecemeal, steadily do master planning across the service area. The maintenance, our crews are equipped to maintain things like this. When you have debris in front of culverts, you've got to get the debris out of the culvert to make sure that that culvert has its maximum ability to convey flood flows. So we've got maintenance forces to deal with that. Projects are smattered all across the service area, so we need to design, construct, and then maintain projects going forward. And we want to encourage good practices. And there are credits off of our fees that reward customers for doing the right things to try and slow down, stop, reduce the amount of stormwater coming off their properties. Rain gardens, 25% credit. Rain barrels, a certain number covering a certain area of roof surface was eligible for 25% credit. Downspout disconnect, where you're allowed to by community code, and spread it out onto a grassed area, was eligible for credits. There's other things about removing impervious surfaces and things like that. Once the program's up and running, the credit manual will be available. It's on the website, and you can see there's a very detailed manual that outlines the practices and the percentages. Okay, this is a demonstration of permeable pavement, one of the technologies and what it can do.
Morning, I'm Dave Ritter with the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District. We're here at the Western Reserve Historical Society today to do a demonstration of permeable pavers. The Western Reserve Historical Society did a renovation of their parking lot using green infrastructure. The green infrastructure allows the rainwater to infiltrate into the ground rather than running off into the combined sewer system. So today we're out here with our vac truck from the sewer district. We're going to let some water out of the back tailgate and see how the system works. So we're looking at the permeable paver installation with actually water being dumped onto the surface. And as you can see, the gaps in between the bricks allow for that stormwater to infiltrate down into the storage reservoir below. So as that water infiltrates through the surface, it'll get down into that storage reservoir and work its way down into the sands below. While it's doing that, if this was normal parking lot runoff, the gravel and the storage layer does help with water quality as well. Some pollutants are removed along the way.
We're really grateful for the support of the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District to make this possible, adding green infrastructure to help with water retention and saving on stormwater runoff.
There's been significant litigation on our stormwater program. This gives you some of the timeline. We actually prevailed in Common Pleas Court, Cuyahoga County, in 2011. Started the program in 2013. The program was halted in September of 2013 by an appeals court ruling, 8th District ruling, so we had to suspend the program. We appealed to the Supreme Court. They accepted the case. The oral arguments for that case were in, I think it was September 10th. There it is. September 10th of 2014. Supreme Court recently ruled in the district's favor. I think it was September 20-something, just this year. There are 5 opposition communities and another interest representing certain property owners that have filed a motion for the court to reconsider certain elements of their decision, or the feeling that they did not adequately address a few elements and want the court to remand those back to the 8th District Court. We, of course, filed our motion to dismiss that, and we're awaiting the final ruling, which we expect soon. Of course, we expected the first ruling to happen much earlier than a year. So we're anxiously awaiting the Supreme Court's ruling and final mandate that they will issue. But we are actively budgeting for stormwater to roll the program back out in 2016, and we're very hopeful of doing so. Okay, so I think it's important to understand where we were locally. We were really, in '69, we were the hotbed of environmental issues across the nation. And when you have rivers burning, you know, that's not a good thing, and we suffered the stigma of that for a long, long time. But things are dramatically different today. This Cuyahoga River, which everyone turned their back on and used as a sewer back in the 50s and 60s, really is making a significant rebound today. We at the sewer district do a lot between our water quality and industrial surveillance group and our analytical services group to monitor stream health. And those are the general ways we do so. We look at water chemistry, we look at the habitat in the streams and along the streams, we look at the fish community, and we look at macroinvertebrates, which is the bug community in the streams. To deal with water chemistry, we do a lot of sampling. We either grab samples out of the stream, or we have what we call data sondes, automatic samplers in the streams that routinely collect information. We look at toxicity testing. We look at fish tissue for problems within the fish. This is I like using this slide. This just gives you an indication of what environmental investments mean. And this is way back in 1984-ish, 85, 6, where Southerly investments were put into the Southerly treatment plant to allow that treatment plant to dramatically reduce the ammonia that comes out of the treated effluent. And ammonia can be very toxic to the aquatic environment. Once we built the facilities, you can see the drop of the ammonia levels going to the Cuyahoga. I mean, it's significant. Now, this costs hundreds of millions of dollars to make this happen, but when this happened, good things happen on the streams. This shows you dissolved oxygen trends. On the bottom is back in the 50s, and the problem on the Cuyahoga was no oxygen through large stretches of the river, and no oxygen means no fish. And you can see where the Akron wastewater plant and the Southerly plant intersect the graph back in the 50s. That treated effluent had too much organics and too much ammonia. It was essentially robbing the stream of oxygen for large stretches. Up to the top, because of improvements at both facilities, the dissolved oxygen levels in the stream have risen dramatically across long stretches of that stream. And when you have more oxygen in a stream, it's a healthier stream, so the bug and fish community tend to respond. We look at what we call the Qualitative Habitat Evaluation Index, the habitat in a stream. And what we're seeing is, along large stretches of the Cuyahoga, we're in the good to excellent range today, where we were in the devoid range way back in the day. So a lot of good things have happened. There's still issues in the navigation channel. That channel's dredged routinely, so it's going to be tough to support robust communities in that stretch. We look at the fish community health through electroshocking and other methods. We're actually looking at how many fish are out there, what types of species do we see. And this graph is the complete, I guess that would be the inverse. The ammonia graph was a lot of pollution, next to nothing. If you superimpose that graph, you see once the ammonia level decreased, and it's not just ammonia that was causing this, but this is a score of the fish community along stretches of the Cuyahoga River. And what you can see is way back, where is that, 84, 94, 84? We didn't have a good fish community. And because of a lot of environmental investment, the scores continue to rise, and now we're in the fair, marginally good, and very good range in many stretches of the Cuyahoga River. So from my perspective, that's a national success story. This river was burning in 1969, and now we're meeting fish scores in large stretches of the river. So that's an amazing development. This year, you know, that thing looks like a 10-pound walleye, but it's actually a 5 or 6 inch walleye. And this year, for the first time, on our electroshocking surveys, we found walleye fry. I believe it was at the intersection of West Creek and the Cuyahoga River, so well upstream. So we're thinking that perhaps walleye have moved up the Cuyahoga River and are now spawning in certain stretches. We're not positive, but it's a good sign. And we see other things that recently, these are other minnows that aren't very tolerant to pollution, and now we're seeing them. We're looking at the bug community in the stream as well. These are called hesterdendes. They're artificial substrate. We put them into the river, and bugs like to colonate between the gaps. Same thing. The graph to the red line indicates the scores back in the 80s. The colored lines, green and blue and purple, we're seeing a tremendous rebound in the bug community. And healthy bugs in a stream mean a healthier stream and really feed, and the fish feed off of that. So we're seeing a tremendous rebound in that community as well, and we're starting to see things like freshwater mussels downstream of our Southerly treatment plant where you would never, ever see them. Yes?
So those bugs that started coming in the summer, I can't think of the name.
Oh, the midges? Oh, no, the mayflies.
One of them.
The big ones?
And they said it was a sign that our water was cleaner or something?
Yeah, that's right. The mayflies are somewhat pollution intolerant, so they disappeared from the landscape for years. But the lake has gotten cleaner, the sediments have gotten cleaner. The investments in environmental improvements have helped. So we have a cleaner lake, and now we're starting to see mayflies reappear, and you know, some call them a nuisance. That's the price of clean water. I mean, that's the way this area was when they colonized, you know, full of bugs. But a healthier lake is going to spawn mayflies, and mayflies are a good indicator of success. And we see things like this. The steelhead trout on the left caught near where the river burned in 1969. So that's amazing. And a few years back, we caught a lake trout, not indigenous to Lake Erie. They're not very tolerant to pollution, but a lake trout that was probably stocked in New York or Pennsylvania made its way, and we found it in the Cuyahoga River. So there's been a lot of success. There are some significant challenges. Harmful algal blooms have been in the forefront. We had a bad algae year this year. 2011 was horrendous. Last year, Toledo had major issues with drinking water. This is a very significant problem on the lake. Again, this was a problem in the 60s and 70s, went away through a lot of investment from point source discharges like treatment plants. Things have changed, and we have algae problems again, and it's going to take a significant investment to deal with it. And there's all kinds of other things that still plague us and will continue to plague us. The algae issue, the microcystins, the toxics that come out of the algae. How are we going to deal with non-point sources like farmland and other open spaces? The Clean Water Act doesn't adequately address those sources. Pharmaceuticals get into the wastewater stream. What problems do those cause to the aquatic environment or human health, and what should treatment plants do about them? A lot of research in that endeavor. And the regulatory climate's always changing. So our regulations are never going to get less stringent. They're going to be more stringent, and there's more investment that's necessary, both through the sewer district and local communities, to maintain the gains we've had and continue to improve things going forward. So I think that's it for me. And I really appreciate your attention. I know that's a lot of stuff, and I hope it was helpful.